Good afternoon. Thank you for those of you who are joining us live, and those of you who maybe are going to be listening to this later on at home. We appreciate your joining us today. We have with us Christian Hancock with Heart and Soul Speech, and she's going to talk to us about what she is doing with children who have speech and language disabilities or need her services, and kind of what they're doing now during COVID-19, what parents can do to support her and support their children during this process. And hopefully we'll all take away a little bit that we can use and learn something from this. But Christian, I noticed you have you have a master's of science, and you have what we refer to as the C's. Can you tell people what the C's are and a little bit about your background?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Christian Hancock, and I'm a speech language pathologist. And when we say that we have our C's, it basically means that we have a certificate of clinical competence, meaning that we have met all of the standards and requirements to have our certification from ASHA, which is our governing body, the American Speech Language Hearing Association. So they give us our certificate of competence, and then we also have a state license through the state, so Texas here. So we say we are licensed and certified speech language pathologists. And I'm the owner of Heart and Soul Speech here in McKinney, and we serve families around McKinney in the North Texas area.
Well, what types of families and children do you serve? What are their needs who come to you at Heart and Soul Speech?
So my practice is in-home therapy, and I specialize in family-centered, routine-based intervention. And what that means is that I go into the home, and I'm using more of a parent coaching model to empower the families, give them the strategies and the confidence to be able to support their child at home with whatever their goals and priorities are as a family. So I know many people think of a speech language pathologist as somebody who serves children who may have an articulation disorder. They may have some speech sound errors. They may say the S incorrectly or the R. And that is what a speech language pathologist does. But we also serve families and children who maybe stutter or have apraxia of speech. And then also in the language domain, we support children who may have difficulty understanding language, following directions, categories, how the language is sorted, and then also how we express ourselves, how we use language to express our needs and communicate with others. And within the language is reading and writing, so we're able to support those who have some literacy or academic concerns as well. Two other parts that families may not be aware that speech pathologists can support is the pragmatics or social communication, and how we are able to communicate with others in a variety of settings with a variety of people, and how we use those nonverbal cues in conversation to successfully share and engage with others. And with that is our cognition and our cognitive skills. So how we use what we call executive function, and that's the ability to self-regulate ourselves, process our emotions, kind of plan and sequence through those basic daily routines. So that's definitely what a traditional speech language pathologist does to support families. And of course, we can work with adults as well. My practice is particularly focused on families. So we do that, but I also wanted to highlight that many people don't realize a speech language pathologist can support families and children who have difficulty swallowing or who are very selective or picky eaters. So many people don't realize, but I like to say that the speech pathologist kind of covers from here to here. The swallowing, the breathing, the cognitive brain skills, and then our speech and language and what our mouth is doing. So that does include feeding as well. So I have specialized in advanced training for serving that population as well.
And I know I was telling you earlier, and pardon me, I'm going to take a quick drink because I got a dry throat, but I think this is the ninth in the series, and this is the first time I've had to take a drink of water, so I think I'm doing good. But I was telling you, this has come up in several of my cases where either in special education or in family law, where I didn't know that it was speech therapists who do feeding therapy. In fact, I had a family law case not too long ago, and the other side was adamant that this child needed to see a physician for feeding therapy. And I knew from having done some special ed cases where this came up, you know, this isn't the physician arena. If you go to a physician, they're going to refer you to a feeding clinic, which will be composed of occupational therapists and speech therapists. So, pardon me. So anyway, thank you for doing that. So what ages of children do you support?
So my practice supports birth. We primarily see the preschool population, but I'm able to support birth to 18 and actually beyond, but that's what my practice specializes in. So at birth, we might see children who have a suspected diagnosis. Maybe they have a medical diagnosis at birth. Or maybe they have trouble breastfeeding, and that's where my feeding specialty would come in to support the mother and the child in their feeding journey. So we can start at birth, and whether or not you realize that language and attachment and development is already started the minute they're born. So, it's helpful to get started. Early intervention is proven to be most successful. We want to invest earlier to be able to really support these children as they develop and get older. So birth to whenever.
Okay. Well, how has being at home affected your clients and their skills?
That's a great question, and I get it a lot, especially from families who are used to the in-home model where I go into the home, I'm supporting the family hands-on. I'm looking forward to seeing my families at home again. But surprisingly, the way that I do therapy, that family-centered, routine-based therapy, has not changed much because it is a parent coaching model. So even though we've moved toward teletherapy and virtual visits, it's still extremely sustainable. And that means that we are working through everyday activities, really meaningful and functional experiences for the family, and then supporting them with positive communication. And that's how we are able to make progress through teletherapy, is I'm able to support the parents, and in turn they can support their children. So research really supports that parents and caregivers can be just as effective as speech language pathologists when they are empowered with the strategies. And so that's really great to know that you guys are the experts on your children and you know what's best for your family. And so I can come in and help support that, what you guys are already doing, the things that you already have in your home, and we can learn how to really maximize that for your child and the goals that you have as a family. So it hasn't changed that much. Obviously, I miss my warm hugs that I get from my little ones, but teletherapy has been extremely successful for many of my families. I do want to mention, with all this change and uncertainty, we're going to talk more about some of the challenging behaviors and how we can support children later. But, it is not always an easy transition. And I want to recognize that families, it's okay to recognize that this is not the best model for you right now. And maybe your priorities have changed, and that's okay. But I do encourage you, if you are looking for a speech language pathologist or you already have therapy, make sure that the communication is open and you let your therapist know what's working and what's not working, so that we can continue to help you feel supported during this time.
We had another guest on that had said, just to reassure parents that, because they're afraid their children are going to regress or they're going to lose some skills. And she said, maybe it's not going to be the same, but there's nothing that we can't fix or can't help you catch up with when we come out of this, but let's keep this momentum going. so we can keep keep developing skills and keep maintaining skills. And we're all going to kind of get through it together. And on the other side of this crisis, we will all continue. So I think that just to give some reassurance to parents that we're kind of all in the same boat, and maybe not the same boat. I heard somebody today, we're not in the same boat, we're in the same ocean. So, but we all have challenges, and some of the children on your caseload, and I know on my special education caseload, they don't need a whole lot more challenges, but if we can all remain positive and support kids through this and support parents supporting their kids through this, we're going to make for a better outcome for the kids.
Right. And it's totally fine. I mean, my priorities have changed. The way I am approaching things and responding now is different. The situation has changed, and that's okay for our families to accept as well. You know, the conditions have changed. Maybe our goals have changed. Maybe instead of really working on categories, we are now working on how we can just get through the day. And that's okay. That's a goal that we can work on through our language development as well. So making sure that parents have these strategies is really critical, no matter what situation we're in, but especially in a time where things have changed. I want parents to feel like they have that lifesaver when they're in this ocean, kind of drowning through the chaos sometimes.
Right. And I'm looking at the slide that you have up on the screen, and you talk about sustainable therapy. And I would assume that this is going to be the same whether you're having a model where you're going into a clinic or where you're actually going into the home versus the telehealth model. What makes it sustainable is the same thing. It's those everyday activities, meaningful experiences, and positive communication. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So whether we are targeting a goal through maybe feeding the dog during the day, we are feeding our pet and we go through the steps to feed our pet and we talk about our pet, or maybe we're cooking dinner together, that doesn't change. And the strategies that we use to support our child's development hasn't changed. So I think parents and caregivers can really take comfort that although it may look a little bit different, therapy is still supporting our children, and they're doing a great job of helping their child through this time using those strategies.
Are there any benefits that are unique to teletherapy that you're seeing during this time frame that, the silver lining to the cloud, right? Are there any unique benefits?
I think for some families, it's working better than in-home. Scheduling is sometimes easier for families. They can just hop right on to the computer. Maybe their children are already used to the computer because they are doing schoolwork through the computer. You know, sometimes these kids are even more advanced with the electronics and technology than I am or than their parents. So they're able to kind of help me. And that's good through our therapy too. If we are sharing a screen, they see what I see on the screen. You know, I can kind of have them tell me, okay, now what should I do to make the picture move on the screen? And then they're practicing their language, but also feeling really confident that they're helping me learn how to use this new technology. So it's kind of been interesting to see those children really flourish in some of those skills because they have them already, and now they're able to put it into a more functional practice than, maybe we don't play video games as often in our home therapy, but now it's kind of like playing a video game, and that might be their wheelhouse. So, it's kind of fun to see these kids engage in a different way that I've never seen because I've never offered teletherapy before. But as a profession, we're sharing lots of success stories and still getting new patients, still discharging and transitioning patients out to the community. So that's really, really exciting that we've got this in place. And hopefully we don't have to do it forever. Hopefully it's temporary, but it's working, and families are able to do it with our support.
Can you give some strategies for parents on communication while they're working with them at home?
Yeah, this is one of the most frequently asked questions I get is, how do I help my kid talk? So I always share this visual. These are some of my go-to strategies. I will use these, almost all of them, in almost every 5-minute period I have with a child. I'm using them over and over and over. So these are strategies that families can integrate into their daily routines. We don't have to, and I don't even recommend setting aside a special time for speech and language target, drill practice, because language is everywhere. Our learning opportunities are everywhere. So we can use these through our daily routine. So I want to encourage parents to focus on communication as a whole and not just the words that our child is using. That may be the ultimate goal, but if you have never thought about it, when we share a conversation, the weight of the conversation comes from nonverbal communication. Maybe the gestures I'm using, maybe my facial expressions, maybe, the nonverbal cues are helping move the conversation forward. And it's not just the words or the vocabulary we choose to use. So focus on the communication as a whole. Maybe you notice your kid is pointing to something that they want, or maybe your child is pulling you to the refrigerator, but they aren't able to say milk. That's a really great sign that your child is getting ready to talk. So, being patient with them, understanding that they are processing what we are saying, if we just focus on supporting their communication as a whole and not just the words.
What about, because we have, I'm sure you have patients that have pragmatic language deficits. And so a lot of kids don't understand those nonverbal cues. So what are some strategies for parents so they can assist their children in that, so they can start to pick up on those nonverbal cues, because that drives a lot of communication?
Absolutely. That's a great question too, and one that can be challenging because they don't have the basic foundation of recognizing those nonverbal cues, like you said. So what I recommend is to start imitating their initiation. If you don't see any initiation, maybe you aren't aware of what their initiation might be, it might look like crying. It might look like a meltdown because they don't have the skills to be able to point or pull you or grunt or even say meh for milk or ma for mama. They're not even at that level yet. So what we want to do is really make sure that they are going to imitate us as we imitate them. And that's a great time to introduce play, parallel play, side-by-side play, front-by-front play. That's where we want them to really be looking at us, watching our facial expression, watching our gestures, and then we can kind of start to imitate the small things that they are doing in hopes that they are now imitating us in return. And as they build these skills through play, through reading together, we are going to kind of up the ante some. So they might now look at us when we look at them, and then we kind of have them follow our point. Now they're looking at me, and I have them now look over here to something that we know that they're really interested in. So they're now looking at my face, watching my face, and now looking at something they want. So just kind of upping the ante slowly and raising our expectations for what we want them to do ultimately is talk and use expressive language. Now, I do want to mention, sometimes talking and using words is not the ultimate goal. Sometimes we have and support children who use AAC, or alternative and augmentative communication, and that might look like using a picture exchange to request what they want, or maybe using an iPad or another device to select an icon or picture that they want to request or that they want to talk about. And so sometimes it's, again, more about the communication exchange and the connection that we receive in that moment, and not just about the words.
Because it's the ultimate goal for a speech therapist, whether the child has an articulation disorder, a pragmatic or receptive or expressive language disorder, ultimately it's communication, right?
Right. It's to be understood.
Right. And so, well, what about social communication? Because a lot of times, and you're working with your child one-on-one, but then you need to adding in that social communication? What are some tips you can give to parents in that regard?
So usually I would recommend a social group where they are playing or engaging with peers, and that does look a little bit different right now, and we're not doing that as much. I would recommend, if you have, some way to FaceTime or get in front of a different person, that kind of taking the person away from the directly face-to-face and moving it to a computer sometimes can elicit more response from a child, just changing the way that they are seeing people. Maybe they are now going to be working with Big Brother, and Big Brother is now the model
Mm-hmm.
and how they can communicate socially with a sibling. When you go on your daily walk, wave to the neighbor, start there. Point out, oh, look, there's Miss Smith. Let's wave to Miss Smith. Those socially accepted greetings and communication exchanges that really help build our social awareness. I think, it is going to be a little bit more difficult, and that's where I would guide parents to seek additional help and strategies from their speech therapist if that's one of their goals.
Well, I know as adults, whether we're professionals or we have other, I know I've attended church by Zoom, and we are engaging in technology right now, so we are able to communicate. It's everything. I had a virtual dinner party a couple of weeks ago. I've been to virtual happy hours, and I've talked to others in your profession that are engaging multiple kids that within a classroom together so they can have that communication. So technology would be a good way of doing that, even if it's getting grandma and grandpa on the phone and having that exchange, or playing a board game and within the family game night, anything to engage that ongoing reciprocal communication. Because do you notice that that is a big issue with some kids, is that's reciprocal component of the communication, the back and forth, the to and fro. So that seems to me that would help that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea, is family game night, any kind of play. And you might be using a puppet, a sock puppet. You might be using an action figure, something that the child is already engaged and interested in. And then you can kind of build those pretend play skills that would then transfer into the social reciprocation like you're talking about. We want to create an opportunity for a child to have language. And sometimes that, to me, is being more forgetful. So it's kind of the way that we forget to open the Play-Doh when we give it to them. And then we wait and see what happens. Maybe they look at us kind of funny, like, you forgot something, or maybe they point, or maybe they try and open it themselves. So giving them a little bit of independence in navigating how they are going to respond, just by being forgetful. So maybe we forget to close the front door, and we don't want them to run out the front door, but maybe we want them to tell us, hey, we forgot to close the door. So those skills are needed to then move forward into recognizing that there is another person in front of us that we are going to be social with. So the social skills kind of come after we have a foundation for language.
Well, can you walk us through some normal household activities and how they can incorporate language and speech support for their child during normal daily activities?
Yeah, so this is exactly where my routine-based intervention comes through. And it's sometimes a little bit different than what families are used to. If I come in, I say, let's do laundry today. And they may think, no, it's time for therapy. But empowering the families to change their perspective of the daily routines and include their child in the daily routine, they're really going to be able to work on the speech and language, if that's their goal, the social skills, and teach life skills and independence in doing the routine together. So it might take a little bit longer than if you had just done it yourself. It might be you might need a little bit more patience than normal, but you are giving them these skills that they need to later do themselves, right? So that's the ultimate goal, is independence. And that's going to look a little bit different for each child on what we want them to be able to achieve. But, there's so many different ways to just talk about what you're doing while you're doing it. And the children want to feel helpful. So if they can feel included in their daily routine, it's meaningful for them. And you're really providing that presence, that connection that the child needs to be able to learn. And so doing this maybe through the kitchen when you're cooking together, which is where I'm always at when we have feeding therapy. There's just so many ways to incorporate new sensory experiences that will help the child expand their diet and become more interested in learning about food. We can change the shape with a cookie cutter. We can smell new spices. We can add food coloring, really making food fun before we start even pushing for our picky eaters. We want to make it positive and fun before we start introducing small ways to take another bite or introduce a new food that they're not willing to explore yet.
And when we're talking about kids who have feeding therapy, I think to the general public, those of us who have worked with kids who receive special education services are somewhat familiar with it, but a lot of people aren't. So explain particularly when a child would need feeding therapy.
So I always say that if a family is stressed about feeding their child, they should consider feeding therapy. Meal times, especially with young children, should be they should be a little bit more easy. And now they might be sleepy, and so then you've got that issue. They might be really, really hungry, and then you need to feed them immediately or whatever. But the family meal time is such a special place. And for a lot of our children who come to the table at a heightened sense of anxiety or worry, or you might be seeing some defiance or challenging behaviors around mealtime where they are rejecting new foods because they have anxiety for one reason or another. Those are families that I encourage to look into feeding therapy. The families that are really coming to me are the ones that have oral motor difficulties. They are not able to chew and break down food or swallow safely. And then on the other side, the families who have children who are very picky eaters. So for a preschooler, that might be a child who has less than 20 foods or does not have at least a couple of foods from each food group. So they may only eat chicken nuggets and French fries, and they're not getting the nutrition and hydration that they need from all the food groups. Those are the kids that benefit.
Or kids, I guess this would fall into the oral motor development, but kids that are extremely sensitive to different textures, and maybe because of that, they're not eating, they're not gaining weight. Those would be children who may be candidates for feeding therapy. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And those are more of the sensory properties. A child who is overwhelmed by a new texture or a new color or a new temperature or flavor, those are sensory aspects. And the problem with food is that those sensory properties are constantly changing. We might get a very cold and frozen milkshake one time, and then the next time we go, it's melted a little bit. So it's completely different. And, the child may have a preference for one or the other, not only a preference, but feel physically safer with one option or one presentation. And so as the sensory properties change, a child may not have the skills yet to be able to process those changes in food. And that's where we get the kiddos that come to the table very anxious because they just aren't sure what they're going to be served.
And it causes a lot of anxiety for the entire family around dinner time because food becomes a real struggle and the fight for the child to get the nutrients that they need becomes a real struggle that affects everyone in the family.
Right. Feeding your child is a really it's a really emotional thing. You want to make sure that you're nourishing your child is getting what they need from food, and you are the person, the parent is the person that is making sure that happens. Now, I personally follow more of a responsive feeding method, and what that means is that the parent or caregiver chooses which foods go on the plate. So we're making healthy options for our child, and then when the child gets to eat. So as a family, we sit down at 6 p.m. and that's our family dinner time. Now, that is the parent's responsibility. That's what the parent has control over. The child has its own responsibilities, and those include how much the child gets to eat from the food of what's presented on their plate, if any at all. So a child can choose not to eat any food from their plate, and that is really helping them establish this healthy boundary, this healthy presentation of their own body and their own foods. It's making them feel safe, and it's also helping parents realize, I did my job, I presented them options, and they weren't ready or didn't feel safe. But we always want to make sure that on their plate that it's presented with the appropriate size. We're not overwhelming them too much with new foods, and they always have a safe food. So we might always include the animal crackers that the kid loves, surrounded with pea-sized bites of whatever else the family is eating. And so they feel safe that maybe they only choose the animal crackers for the next 3 nights, but it's on their plate and they feel safe enough to be at the family table with us, and they are also getting exposure to those pea-sized bites. And maybe on day 4, they take a tiny bite of the lasagna noodle. Great, that's step 1. They've been exposed to it, they have time to learn about it. Maybe they touch it the first time, maybe they smell it the second time, and on the 3rd time they might be ready to see it or to taste it. So keeping it on their plate and separating those responsibilities kind of helps the family feel like they're making progress. And it is slow progress, but it's built around trust, and that takes time.
Well, and it seems to be some of the strategies that you have on here engage the child in either the preparation or the presentation of what they will eat, and so it gives the child some ownership in it, which I would think would decrease anxiety and
just more opportunities to learn about the food. If you're making it, you see exactly what goes in it. You have an opportunity to break it down into those ingredients, those pieces that makes up your food. And so again, they're learning about it in a fun way without any pressure to eat it yet. And then they feel more ready to kind of be adventurous later.
And then in addition to feeding therapy, you're also looking, I see, at mealtime as being an optimal time to develop speech and language. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I know mealtime can be chaotic, right? It's usually dinner time is really stressful for a lot of families because it's at the end of the day, the children are tired, you're throwing together something after work and presenting it. But meal times together and cooking are one of my favorite places and ways to get kids talking and eating. So you can talk about some target words that you have. You can ask questions or, kind of talk about the actions, build vocabulary through verbs and adjectives. This is a hot plate and this is a cold spoon, and having them really learn through the hands-on experience of cooking together or eating together.
Well, and then just targeting those words, and also the receptive language as far as problem solving, like measuring and how many spoonfuls.
Following directions.
Yeah, following the directions. Well, thanks. It seems like there are so many simple family activities that we can engage in with kids that will help develop that language and support whatever speech therapy goals there are. So are there any other just simple family activities that people can engage in?
I know right now I have been living for our daily walks because it gets us out of our routine and gets us out of the house a little bit. But even outside of this time, I constantly want to just explore nature with children, because I think it opens up a whole new way of things to talk about. It kind of changes their environment and helps them develop their curious mind. So again, the same strategies that we would use in the kitchen or when we're doing laundry, we can make comments about what we see. We could play I Spy. We could, ask really more abstract questions about, where do you think the snail goes at night? And see where their minds take you. So these are for verbal children, children who are already talking. Maybe you can have your word list talking. If you're working on the k sound, you see a car, a cat, a key. Just kind of being mindful of what your priorities and focus is, and then take it into that routine.
What about nonverbal children? What types of opportunities could you take advantage of, say, just in a nature walk or playing in the yard, where you can encourage communication if they're nonverbal?
So again, I want them to be able to imitate me in my nonverbal cues. So if they aren't talking yet, how can we play ball and take turns back and forth? They're reciprocating the action. They're hopefully looking at me or looking at the ball. It's more of the action-based nonverbal cues that I want them to pick up on, so that way they are building the understanding of how the language works when they're able to express it later.
Thanks. It seems to me, all of our days follow a pattern, but having that established pattern in your day is really hard right now. I know I will wake up, stumble out of bed, walk up the stairs, sit at my desk, and I'll look up and it'll be midnight, which is not very healthy. And so, can you give some recommendations to parents for how they should structure their day and their child's day so that you can have that sustainable treatment for them?
Yeah, absolutely. The daily routines have completely changed. Whether you're working from home or you're still going into work, your child is most likely at home now, and their routine has changed also. So what I've been encouraging and had success doing is changing changing routines into rhythms. And that's kind of taking a child's needs into consideration as you set your daily agenda. And it's not just your child's needs, but the day's needs. Sometimes I really enjoy having my breakfast at 9 a.m. after the kids have woken up and had some of their reading time. 9 a.m., a nice relaxing breakfast. But you know what? That's not realistic, and that doesn't happen 9 times out of 10. So what is that rhythm that I wake up, I sense the day, I realize, okay, my kids need to eat breakfast at 8:15 as soon as they wake up. They're starving, and they're ready to go on their day. So I need to get something in them quick before they run off. And that's me recognizing the natural rhythm of our day. So what I like to encourage families to do is think about 3 anchors in your day. And these are really non-negotiable times in your day that do not change. So it's, how do we get from sunup to sundown without a meltdown? And sometimes that's impossible, but these anchors will help keep your day moving forward. So, maybe it's your meal times, maybe you're working around your work schedule. For us personally, it's our sleep times. We wake up at 7 a.m., 2 p.m. is our nap, and 7 p.m. is bedtime. So how can I make the day get to the next anchor? And sometimes it doesn't go the way it's planned. Sometimes the boat floats a little farther away and there's some big waves in between, but I always know, okay, the next anchor is going to bring us back. We've got nap time coming up. If I can get to there, it's going to keep me in place. So those anchors are really going to help keep the day moving forward and have some control and predictability that grounds us in the day. Helping a child prepare for play can be beneficial if your child is able to play independently, or if you can encourage them to play independently, giving them a safe yes space. So, maybe moving the snacks down lower so they're able to access snacks independently without coming and asking you for help, interrupting your day or your focus time. Maybe you are able to set up kind of a play station next to you as you work for some quiet play if they're not able to be unsupervised. But really, when all else fails, my go-tos are get outside, get moving, or get in the water. So maybe we take a bath in the middle of the day just to get our control back, because those are sensory experiences that are going to help the child self-regulate or kind of get back into their control. And then creating that independence. Maybe you're not able to set up a play space, or maybe you're not able to help them play more independently, but we can kind of fill up their connection bucket. And I think as humans, all of us have a connection bucket. And, we want to help children understand that mommy is focused right now on work, but when the timer goes off, I will have 10 minutes to be able to give you that undivided attention. So really kind of making sure they're full so that you can do what you need to do during your daily rhythm, and then come back to your anchor where you are able to give that attention and fill their bucket back up.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of hard. I like the way you refer to this as anchors in the day and rhythm, because really we don't have a real routine right now. We do, it's just different. Mm-hmm. And so you can kind of, it seems to me you can break the day into chunks is what you're talking about. When is the breakfast time and getting ready to play, and because that's how kids learn, is through play. Mm-hmm. And then how are we going to keep them independent, but at the same time keep time, because many of our parents are working at home while trying to be the supportive person for their child, and it's right. A challenge. So so it's really important, it would seem, to create that independence but have frequent check-ins, so you're doing that communication with them.
Yeah.
So have you noticed that any of your patients have been stressed over the whole, to the extent that they understand? I know some children that are 3 or 4 really don't know. They just know that mom's home all the time. In fact, I saw a meme about a dog about I don't know why my human's home all the time. I'm ready for my human to go. But do we know, I mean, are you seeing that in some of your patients, that they really have some stress about what's going on with COVID-19, or why we're not going anywhere, why we're staying in?
Yeah, I think all children at any age, if we really look at how they respond to change, I think we would see, even in children with special needs, I think we would see that they understand something is different, whether it's good or bad. Something is different in their environment. Maybe it's the way that I'm showing up as a parent or responding to them. Maybe I'm on the phone and computer a lot more than I used to, and I'm not able to fill their connection bucket as much as they were in the past. So I think all ages, kids are recognizing that something's different, and that's incredibly difficult for them to process, and it's incredibly difficult for parents as well. So as we start to talk about change, and in this case COVID-19 with our children, I really like this acronym Aloha, and it's something I saw from the Fundamentals of Caring, Fundamentals of Caring, which was a movie I saw several years ago, and this has always stuck with me, and now it's something that I use in all difficult conversations with children. And I like this acronym because it breaks it up into a way that I understand. So when we want to check in with our children about how they're feeling, we ask them, how do you feel right now? And it could be, how do you feel about coronavirus? Or it could just be like, how are you feeling today? And what have you heard, if they're old enough to maybe have more of that realization that something's out there? What have you heard about it? And then we really want to be present when they're talking about what they know or what their fears are. We want to listen, and we might have a kid that shares a lot. We might have a kid that isn't interested in sharing. We might have a kid that isn't able to share verbally or in a way that makes sense to us. So in listening, we also want to observe. And there's several signs of anxiety and worry and these big feelings that we see in our children. And that's where I say kids of any age will maybe have these signs of change in sleeping patterns. Maybe they're really clingy couch potatoes now, and they don't really know why, but they feel this way, and they're not able to express it. And this is where we do see maybe some regression in skills. So picking up on those signs through observation will help us understand how we can help our children. So when we start the conversation with them, or how we respond to them, we want to be honest, we want to be direct, and we want to be very specific. So, children are very empathetic. They want to know, how is Jimmy from my class doing? How is grandma and grandpa doing? They have these big hearts and these big feelings for others. And so we want to address that in our response. Reassure them that there is good things happening. The doctors are helping people, and scientists are learning so much, and there's good things happening. And you know what? It's okay to be worried. And I feel worried sometimes too. And then really validating them in those feelings and helping them understand you feel very brave when you stay at home to protect your friends or whatever it might be. So really helping them understand that they are able to contribute to the conversation as well. And we might see these challenging behaviors happen when they do feel out of control, like all of us do. We don't really know, the future is uncertain, and so we feel a little out of control, and that's where we start to see the meltdowns happen. So we can offer a little bit of control just through simple choices. Do you want an apple or an orange today? It may not seem like a big issue, but I think for kids who are looking for more, they don't feel as big in the world, but they feel like they can control their own world. Do you want to do homework before lunch or after? Those kids are really going to be able to feel a little bit more in control. And then we want to follow up with them again, maybe later in the day or maybe at a later time in the week. We talked about some really big stuff, bud. How are you feeling now? And did you think of anything else you want to ask? So checking back in, and maybe this process you Aloha several times during the day or several times during the week. But I think this helps give a good guideline of how we can talk about difficult conversations with our children.
Well, and some kids understand more than others, but I think as parents, we would be really, it would not be wise to assume that just because we're saying COVID or we're talking about things that they're not picking up on things, that maybe they're hearing something from the news. If the news is on, maybe they're overhearing a conversation with mom and dad. So I think it would be really difficult for any child not to have heard something about what is going on, because it is such a present issue that we're all dealing with now. And if mom or dad are stressed, at a minimum, they're picking up on the stress.
Right. I have a 2-year-old at home, and of course he doesn't understand the coronavirus. He doesn't understand what it is, but I did start to see some of those behaviors. He wasn't sleeping as well as he normally does. He has wanted to just kind of take it easy for the past couple days. His energy level is lower. So we did have the conversation. I know it's been really tough lately because we miss our friends and we miss swim lessons, but I'm really proud of you for talking to me, and it's okay to be worried.
Right. And just that reassurance to them, because they are picking up on it. I think, I have adult children at home right now, but they pick up on it in one way, and it causes one of my daughters a lot of anxiety. And I can't imagine had they been younger how this would have affected them. And then you pile on top of it some of the children that we serve in our populations of our clients, the additional stressors and uncertainty, especially a child that needs a whole lot of structure and a whole lot of reassurance, how that can actually affect them. And if would it be true that as the anxiety increases, we may be seeing some regression in some of their skills?
Yes, absolutely. Not only regression, but also the challenging behaviors. And I would even say that that's completely appropriate and expected. For these children, they don't have the executive functioning skills yet, the cognitive ability to be able to process these big feelings. They recognize it, or they might feel something is off, but they're not able to express it. So the way that I have started teaching strategies for supporting challenging behaviors is to remember the 3 R's. And it's based on research by Dr. Ross Green, who is the author of The Explosive Child. It's a great book. I recommend it to families. And, he is inviting parents and caregivers to change the perception from blaming the child for not doing a better job to really understanding that their behavior is most likely based on unmet needs. So they're not able to process disappointment or frustration. They're not able to process the sensory input that they're receiving all at once. They're not able to problem solve independently, or they're not mentally flexible. And then finally, they're not able to communicate this to us in a way that we understand. So I can't imagine having these feelings inside, which I have as an adult, but I'm able to talk about it, and they aren't. And so we see these coping behaviors that are undesirable or inappropriate for us as adults, but it's really the child doing the best they can. So when we talk about behavior as being communication, they're communicating these unmet needs, and how we show up as parents and how we respond to a child acting out. He might actually saying, I miss my friends and I feel scared. But what I see is a toddler meltdown on the side, screaming, kicking, crying, and that's really my opportunity to help the child regulate first. One of my favorite things to say is you can't reason with unreasonable, and toddlers are unreasonable. So we want to help them regulate first, feel safe, calm, and loved, and then we can move to relating. We want to help relate their feelings, validate their feelings, just by scripting what you see. And this takes away the good versus bad emotion in the label that we see. We just say, maybe, I see your body is very upset and I understand this is hard for you. So I'm not saying one way is good or one way is bad, but I'm identifying it for themselves, labeling the behavior or the emotion that's attached to the behavior so that later they can use that in their own self-awareness, and then feeling validated as well. And then finally, we want to help get to the reason. So after the child is calm, after the child feels heard, now we can start processing and explaining the actions and the results of that behavior. So it hurts when you hit me. I cannot let you hurt me. But we explain why it's inappropriate and why we don't like it, or why it cannot continue. And then we ask the child, how can I help you right now? What would happen if you made a different choice to take a deep breath, or ask for help if they're verbal or able, or a different alternative, and help them kind of come up with a way that's appropriate for themselves and their developmental level. So I think our response has to follow these steps for it to be successful. And a lot of times we go out of order, and that's where it becomes more of a challenge later, because we're not responding in this way.
Well, not to tell on myself as a parent, but you're going through this, and I'm remembering back to the terrible twos, and it's like, in the moment, this is hard.
Yes.
In the moment of dealing with a tantrum, this is hard. And when you have a child with communication issues, especially maybe someone's nonverbal, it's just you getting them safe first, And then, they, at a minimum, you can ask them, show me, or, point, this is how you do it, or yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking back to my own.
Well, I'm really glad you
lives.
brought this up, because it's absolutely difficult. It's so hard in the moment when your anxiety and frustration is already through the roof, and you've got a screaming child in your ear. It's so hard to make the conscious decision to follow these steps, and it takes practice. And so, I'm in the thick of it right now. I've got toddlers crawling all over me, and so, I'm not perfect. I don't always respond in this way, but I'm conscious enough and want to intentionally realize that my child is not mentally able to process this without my help. And so if I can just keep this in the forefront of my mind as we go through these big feelings with our children, I'm able to kind of show up in a more positive way and a more effective way. Now that I've set set the foundation for the child, we can build on it in the future. So it's okay if you are just starting this journey. It's okay if you don't get it right all the time. That's okay.
Any other tips or pointers you have for parents to support their children during this time?
Yeah, I think this moves right into my last point, and it's that I want parents to know that our children are really doing the best that they can in this time, and so are you. It's impossible to do it all and do it all right. It's hard working from home. It's hard being a kid and having your world turned upside down. But I found this exercise by Cecilia Hilke of Happily Family, and she was asking parents, what 3 words do you want your children to use when they describe the pandemic or talk about it later? For me personally, I was thinking about it, and I want my children to remember this time as a time with family, a time of fun and making it fun when we can, and feeling safe, and then a time of connection. So those are my 3 words, and that's really helped me prioritize how I'm able to respond during this time. If it's not included in those 3 words, I'm letting it go.
So those 3 words being fun, safety, and
connection, or I said fun, family, and connection.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up this point, because when we look back on this a couple of years from now, our kids are going to look back at it 20 years from now. What are they going to, I think that is very important. What are you going to remember? And either we're displaying panic for them, or there's a sense of calm. I mean, this is a stressful time for parents and for kids, but there are so many good things that are coming out of this. I mean, I have never cooked family meals so much in my children's lives, and we've actually done more things together, and it's actually been a really good kind of simple time to connect and to do these things together. And with that comes opportunities for speech and language development. Is that right?
Right. And I think, it's important to realize that this is not always easy for every family. Like you said, we're not in the same boat, but we're in the same ocean. So I want to recognize that it's not easy, and your words may be completely different because of your priorities and needs, just your basic needs. But for parents, I encourage you, they say we may not be getting on an airplane anytime soon, but they say put your oxygen mask on first, because I want parents to really understand that if you're not taking care of yourself, it's going to be really difficult to take care of your children. So, really prioritize and practice time, making sure your needs are met so that you can turn around and then, fill up that connection bucket with your children. So take care of yourself first.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to open it up a little bit to questions, and you have answered all of our questions, or all of mine, but I'm sure somebody may have a question. So if you have a question, just put it in the chat box or on the question and answer. And we've had with us today Christian Hancock with Heart and Soul Speech. And I'm so glad we finished out your last slide about making those connections, because ties right into the title of your company, Heart and Soul, because that's really what it's all about with our kids. We love them with all our heart and our soul. They are our heart and our soul, and we need to keep our homes the heart and soul of our family right now, and more than ever. So thank you so much, Christian. And for those of you who are watching this online later, I will also have the resources for you on our website, www.beyondtherelationship.com. And then you can also go to heartandsoulspeech.com is Christian Hancock's website, and we will have this video posted and as well as resources. But we thank you so much. And
Thank you so
Christian.
much for this opportunity. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you.
This was awesome. Thank you.